Welcome back, you impossible paradoxes. You walking contradictions that make invisible structures hesitate. You breathing proof that something in the design did not account for you. Not because you are louder, not because you are rebellious, but because you exist without asking where you're allowed to stand. Somewhere, in abstract halls built of tradition and expectation, there is always a conversation happening about people like you. Not real halls, not real councils, but those internal architectures of hierarchy that decide who belongs where, the symbolic masons of the world, the ancient blueprints of status, ceremony, legitimacy. They lean over polished tables made of inherited beliefs and whisper one word when they sense you. Crown, not out of generosity, not out of admiration alone, but out of strategy. Because when something cannot be dismissed, it must be absorbed. When something refuses to shrink, it must be dressed up, elevated, formalized, given a title so it can be framed and surrounded with rules. Across from them sit the colder mechanisms, the symbolic agencies, the algorithms of social order, the categorization systems, the quiet, bureaucratic minds of conformity that do not care about ceremony, only predictability, and their word is different. Eliminate, not through harm, not through destruction, but through erasure by dismissal, through labels, through isolation, through reducing complexity into something manageable, through marginalization so subtle it looks like indifference. Two abstract forces, two strategies: crown or eliminate, assimilate or dismiss, elevate you into a golden cage or shrink you into irrelevance. And yet, neither side can seem to move. Because you are not reacting the way the structure expects. You see, systems rely on participation. Hierarchies rely on desire. Control models rely on fear. If you crave elevation, they can offer you a throne. If you fear rejection, they can threaten exile. If you need validation, they can withhold it. But what do they do with someone who wants neither? What do they do with someone who does not tremble at exclusion and does not hunger for coronation? You stopped asking to be seen, and in doing so, you became impossible to ignore. The symbolic masons study you as if you are an architectural anomaly, a pillar that stands without being placed, a structure that supports itself. They understand legacy, they understand tradition, they understand power that flows through approved channels. But you did not come through the channel. You did not wait for initiation. You did not seek endorsement. You built your inner throne from solitude, not ceremony. You carved your authority from self-trust, not recognition. To them, that is both impressive and dangerous. Because if power can be self-legitimized, then what exactly have they been guarding all this time? They debate, absorbing you. They imagine offering you symbolic robes, titles, platforms, proximity to influence. They imagine inviting you into the circle so that your sovereignty becomes another asset in their architecture. But they miscalculate something fundamental. You are not searching for a circle. You are not waiting to be chosen. And that unsettles them more than rebellion ever could. Rebellion can be suppressed. It relies on opposition. It confirms the system's importance. But indifference to reward and punishment, that is a glitch. The symbolic agencies, meanwhile, approach you differently. They do not care for ritual, they care for data, patterns, predictability. They feed identities into models and expect outputs. You do not generate clean outputs. They attempt to categorize you, ambitious but not climbing, independent but not isolating, influential but not campaigning, calm but not submissive. The file returns undefined. You are not hostile enough to justify rejection. not compliant enough to be predictable, not dependent enough to manipulate. So elimination, in their language, means something subtle. It means quietly excluding you from the main narrative. It means not amplifying you. It means pretending you are ordinary. It means dissolving your impact through strategic silence. But here is the flaw in that strategy. You are not powered by amplification. You are not sustained by applause. Your sense of identity is not outsourced to audience metrics. So erasure does not frighten you, and without fear, their tool dulls. The argument between crown and eliminate intensifies, not because you are aggressive, but because you are self-contained. You represent autonomy that does not require endorsement. You embody authenticity that does not seek assimilation. And authenticity is destabilizing in environments built on performance. They expected you to chase something: status, approval, influence, safety. Instead, you withdrew belief. You stopped equating elevation with worth. You stopped equating rejection with loss. And something subtle shifted. Authority depends on belief. Hierarchy depends on shared agreement. Control depends on participation. When you quietly stepped back from that agreement, you did not attack the system. You simply removed your energy from it, and the structure felt lighter. Unsteady, the symbolic masons ask themselves, if someone can stand sovereign without our crown, what does that imply about the crown itself? The symbolic agencies ask, if someone cannot be incentivized or intimidated, what leverage remains? You are not trying to dismantle anything. You are simply not kneeling, and the absence of kneeling feels like defiance to those accustomed to posture. Here is the paradox they cannot resolve. If they crown you, they validate your independence. They acknowledge that power can exist outside their approval. If they eliminate you through dismissal, they risk proving that their system cannot contain nuance, that it only recognizes extremes. And you are neither extreme nor compliant. You are steady, grounded, unmoved. You walk into rooms without asking permission from invisible hierarchies. You speak without calibrating your truth to what is safest. You disengage when conversations reduce complexity into roles. And every time you choose authenticity over performance, a small crack appears in the architecture of expectation. Not enough to collapse it, but enough to remind it that it is constructed, that it is not eternal. You are not dangerous because you attack. You are unsettling because you reveal. You reveal that elevation without integrity is hollow. You reveal that rejection without fear loses power. You reveal that autonomy is possible without ceremony. The symbolic crown becomes heavy in their hands because it no longer guarantees loyalty. The symbolic elimination loses edge because dismissal cannot erase someone who does not define themselves by visibility. You have become a paradox that immunity grows around, too sovereign to be absorbed, too grounded to be erased. And the deeper truth, you did not set out to be any of this. You simply stopped negotiating your identity. You stopped shrinking to fit narratives that felt convenient for others. You stopped explaining yourself to structures that never truly listened. You stopped chasing rooms that required you to leave pieces of yourself at the door. And in that quiet withdrawal, you became something unmanageable. The symbolic halls of power, those internalized hierarchies we all inherit, do not know how to process someone who opts out without bitterness. You are not resentful. You are not seeking revenge. You are not rallying followers. You are simply choosing alignment. And alignment is disruptive in systems built on compromise. The argument continues, abstract and unresolved, crown or eliminate, elevate or dismiss, contain or ignore. They debate strategy while you sleep, but here is what they cannot admit out loud. Their debate depends on your participation. If you desired their crown, they could negotiate. If you feared their elimination, they could intimidate. But you are not negotiating, and you are not afraid. You are not outside the system in a dramatic sense. You are simply no longer emotionally owned by it. And that difference is everything. Because the moment someone realizes their worth is intrinsic, the external structure must either evolve or reveal its limitations. You walk forward without looking back at the argument, not because you are unaware, but because you understand something deeper than both sides. The crown was never yours to seek. The elimination was never yours to fear. And somewhere in those symbolic halls, the voice is lower. Not because they have reached a conclusion, but because they are beginning to suspect something far more unsettling. Perhaps you were never under their jurisdiction to begin with. Perhaps the paradox was not a threat. Perhaps it was evolution. The debate continues in whispers. The file remains open. The crown sits unused. The erasure remains incomplete. And you keep walking, unchanged, uncontained, uninterested in both reward and punishment. As the argument about you grows quieter, more uncertain, and far less confident than it was before. The argument never truly ended. It simply ran out of certainty, while the symbolic halls of hierarchy sat in quiet recalculation, while the cold structures of categorization kept refreshing their models, hoping for a clearer result. You did something far more disruptive than reacting. You continued, not dramatically, not defiantly, just steadily, and that is what unsettled them most. Because systems understand conflict. They understand rebellion, ambition, desperation. They know how to respond when someone fights for the crown or trembles at the thought of erasure. Those are familiar stories. Those are manageable narratives. But you did not chase elevation, and you did not brace for rejection. You moved forward without referencing either. The symbolic crown began to lose its shine. Not because it was taken away, but because you stopped looking at it. Its power depended on desire. When desire vanished, it became decoration. The symbolic elimination began to lose its edge. Not because it failed dramatically, but because you did not experience dismissal as death. You understood something essential. Exclusion only wounds when belonging is outsourced. You had already brought belonging back home, so the structure found itself in an unfamiliar position. It could not reward you into loyalty. It could not threaten you into submission. It could not ignore you into invisibility. You were not louder. You were not larger. You were simply internally complete. And internal completeness is disruptive to any model built on external validation. The ancient architectures of hierarchy slowly recognized what they had been circling all along. Crowning you would not contain you. It would only expose that legitimacy is not something they manufacture. It is something individuals embody. The cold mechanisms of categorization recognized something equally uncomfortable. Eliminating you through dismissal would not reduce your impact. It would only reveal the fragility of systems that cannot account for nuance. You were never trying to outplay them. You simply stopped playing. And when you stop playing a game built on reward and punishment, the scoreboard becomes irrelevant. Here is the quiet realization that settled into those abstract halls as the debate faded. You were never subject to either force. You were never waiting for permission to rise. You were never fearing permission to remain. The paradox they could not solve was never a threat. It was evolution unfolding in real time. You evolved past needing their ceremony. You evolved past fearing their silence. You evolved past interpreting power as something granted or withdrawn. True authority does not arrive through coronation. True sovereignty does not disappear through rejection. Both are internal recognitions. When you withdrew belief from their binary, crown or eliminate, you removed the very fuel that sustained the argument. Power structures depend on belief. Hierarchies depend on participation. Control models depend on emotional investment. You quietly reclaimed yours, and in doing so, you did not destroy anything. You revealed that nothing external was holding you in the first place. The system can continue. It will continue. Hierarchies will still crown. Mechanisms will still categorize. The architecture will still function for those who need it, but it can never unsee what it saw in you. It saw someone who does not equate elevation with worth. It saw someone who does not equate rejection with erasure. It saw someone who stands complete without applause and unshaken without validation. That awareness will linger like a subtle crack in certainty, not loud enough to collapse the structure, but permanent enough to change it and you. You remain what you always were, not crowned, not eliminated, not defined by either. Calmly sovereign, internally legitimized, untouched by the binary, the paradox was never your weakness. It was proof that autonomy does not fit into systems designed to sort. And that is not rebellion. That is maturity. That is evolution. And you walk forward not as a threat, not as a legend, not as a symbol to be managed, but as someone who finally understood that real power never needed permission.